Hi, welcome back to the channel. Yesterday morning, we actually had our first clutch of Rankins Dragons hatching out. Had two from our first clutch that made it. Unfortunately, she hid her eggs. I did not realize that she had laid them, so only two out of the first, out of her about 18, I believe, eggs she had made it. But those two eggs that did make it hatched out yesterday morning, started hatching out yesterday morning, and now they are fully hatched out of their eggs, and we are going to show you how to set up some baby Rankins Dragons. Alright, so for any baby lizards, specifically for setting up baby Rankins Dragons today, I always use some sort of paper towel. I like these blue shop towels. You can get at any hardware store like Home Depot or Lowe's. You just take these and lay them in the bottom of the enclosures. You don't really have to worry about any. They're easy to clean up. When your baby dragons make a mess, you just take them, throw them away, put some new ones in. You can change these every day. Just to give something for them to claw on. I don't like to have just a bare bottom with glass. Gives them no traction to be able to walk around. And you also don't want to put my adults. I keep on a mixture of sand, cocoa husk, and topsoil. Just because that is more of a natural substrate for them. As babies, you don't want to keep them on any loose substrate like that because they can very easily swallow that and ingest that sand as babies. And as babies, they're a lot less likely to be able to pass it. Like adults, as long as your adult is healthy, it shouldn't get impacted. As babies, they can become impacted very easily. And in the wild, these babies would be mostly probably in a rockier area where they're not really going to be eating anything off of sand. And in the wild, the death rate on baby reptiles and lizards is very, very high. They have a very high mortality rate, which is the reason why most reptiles lay so many eggs out in the wild, because they know that not very many of them are actually going to survive to adulthood. So after you get your substrate in the bottom, which is, for us right now, we'll be using paper towel until they're at least about 6 months old. I keep them in paper towel at between 6 months and a year old is when I usually switch them over to a looser substrate, sand, topsoil, any kind of more natural substrate like that. You also want to put in a shallow water dish, basically enough. You don't want the water any deeper that if they were to stand in it, that they can still get their head above the water. So you only want, I'll show you our baby dragons in a moment when we put them in there, when we get this all ready. But you don't want the water probably any deeper than about a quarter to a half an inch deep as babies, because these guys are very, very tiny as babies. Overall length, they're probably less than 2 inches from tail to nose. So shallow water dish. You're going to want to empty that, clean it, and refill it at least once or twice a day, because you are going to be having a fairly warm heat lamp on here, as well as your UVB light, UVB light on here. So that water is going to dry out and evaporate very quickly. So you may have to fill this water bowl several times a day, but you want to make sure that you keep that water bowl filled, so that your babies do not dehydrate and die on you. Water, even for desert species or arid dryland species like Rankins Dragons, water is still very, very important for every species, especially ones that would live in a more arid or dry, because they don't get it very often. So in captivity, we always want to make sure we have clean, fresh water every day. Alright, so we also want to put in a hide and a basking platform for these guys. You obviously want your basking platform on the side where your heat lamp is going to be, and you want a hide on the cooler end, so they have somewhere to get away from the heat. Um, they have somewhere to get away from the heat. It is going to get hot in here. This is only going to house the two babies that I hatched out. This is only 10 gallons. I would not put more than 2 or 3 babies in something this size. If you get too many of them in a small area like this, they will fight each other. And with so many of them, you'll end up getting babies with nipped tails and toe nips. Unfortunately, I have had this in the past. So this is only going to house the first two. I have another clutch hatching in the next couple of weeks. Right now, I believe I have 17 good eggs in that clutch. So that clutch is going to be separated into several different tanks. Anywhere from 10 to 20 gallon tanks, probably 3 or 4 different tanks. So I don't have more than about 3 and a 10 gallon. And I probably want to put more than about 5 in a 20 gallon enclosure. This is only for babies. Once they start getting larger, they're going to be needing separate housing. A 10 gallon tank is good for your Rankins Dragon, probably for up to about a year. After a year, you definitely want to upgrade them to a minimum of a 20 gallon enclosure for a single animal. I would do a minimum of a 40 gallon for a pair of dragons. I keep all of my adult pairs in either 40 gallon or 75 gallon enclosures. I would definitely say that is the minimum I would keep any of them in. Bigger is better. As they tend to say bigger is better. In the case of reptiles, that isn't always the case. You want to make sure that large enclosures are very good, but you also want to make sure that you have visual barriers in your enclosure, especially as they're younger. Once they're older, give them a large enclosure, still with visual barriers, but a much larger enclosure. But these animals out in the wild don't like open areas. They live in rock crevices in the desert, crammed into tiny little spaces, because they are prey for many other animals. And being in large enclosures with big open spaces can actually do more harm to your animal than good, as they will get freaked out, scared. It can actually decline their health because they are afraid that they're going to be attacked and eaten by a predator. They don't like being in wide open enclosures. Usually, I'm sure if you've kept reptiles for any amount of time, you'll know that you can have your bearded dragon in a 100-gallon enclosure, and they will find the tiniest little space to cram themselves into, like most reptiles will. So, basking platform on the hot end, hide on the cool end, water dish in the middle somewhere. Like I said, you're gonna need to be refilling this probably at least once or twice a day. Just make sure you keep water in there. Being such a small enclosure, that water is gonna evaporate really quick, with only being less than half an inch of water in there. So you really want to keep an eye on that water dish. Make sure it is kept full. Alright, so now that we've got our enclosure all set up, let's get over and get our new 2 little babies out of the incubator and get them set up into their new homes. All right, now that we've got our little babies here, we will get them. We got our little babies here. Get a good picture. We will get them into their new home. All right. So let's get these two little babies into their new homes. You can see these are the eggs they crawled out of. These guys are very, very tiny. They're first hatched out. As you can see, it's hard to see on the video. The video does not do this any justice at all. But that is one of the most beautiful dragons I have ever seen. If you can see those bright orange markings, those two stripes along its back, and there's also an orange line along its side spikes right there. I think that this baby is definitely going to be a holdback for us this year. She is beautiful. I'm hoping it's a female, but I got a couple of males that will be ready for her another year and a half, 2 years when she is old enough to breed. But that is a gorgeous, gorgeous dragon. So let's set her down right there. Get its sibling out right here. Another gorgeous little thing. Pretty, pretty little babies. I love Rankins Dragons. But if you've ever bred bearded dragons, you're not ready for how tiny these things hatch out. Overall, this thing is no more than, let's say, 2 inches from the tip of its tail to the end of its nose. These things are so tiny when they're born, but they're so cute. Put her down in her new home. As you can see, this one right here is already walking around, exploring her home, checking out her new house for for the next few months. Oh, she's loving it. Get their water filled up for them. Just make sure it's not too much. You want to use a shallow dish. You don't want them drowning. You do want to make sure that you have UVA, UVB lights on these guys. That is very important, especially when they're young, growing, to help them to be able to create calcium in their body to maintain their growing bones. Also, you want to make sure you have a very good heat lamp on these guys. These guys will take basking temperatures well over 100 degrees. As adults, their basking lights reach between 110 and 120 degrees, so these guys like it hot. I don't give it quite so hot as babies, especially in a small enclosure like this. You don't want to overheat them, which it is always easier to overheat your dragons than it is to underheat them. Overheating can kill them very, very fast. So I always err on the cooler side just to be safe with these guys. You want an ambient temperature. Look at that, he's already going into the water. You want ambient temperature with these guys in the mid to upper 70s. And then I do a basking spot for my babies in the mid to upper 90s for these guys. That is a gorgeous little baby dragon. And as babies, these guys, this is day 2. They were just hatched out yesterday. They started hatching out yesterday morning. By the time I got home from work yesterday, they were both fully hatched out of their egg and starting to move around. So I left them in an incubator for another day just to help them. You don't want to take them out of the incubator too soon as they're absorbing up their yolk and the yolk sac that they had inside the egg. So they usually won't eat for a day or two after they hatch. So tomorrow, which will be the second day that they've been out of the egg, I will offer them some food. You want to do some very finely broken up or chopped up greens. Basically same thing that the adults eat, just in a smaller form. So greens like dandelion greens, romaine lettuce, darker greens, endives, stuff like that. Turnip greens, mustard greens, and very small crickets. I do pinhead crickets for these guys. I will also do, since they're so tiny, I actually usually start them out on fruit flies, which if you've seen my video from a few weeks ago, you will know that I now have little froglets, dart froglets. So I have a couple cultures of fruit flies to feed them. So my baby dragons for the first couple of weeks usually just eat fruit flies. Then they'll be big enough to start eating pinhead crickets, and then small crickets, and then from there on, they'll go to small dubia roaches. I do mini mealworms. Basically, the biggest variety of a diet as we can get for these guys. So you always want to give all of your animals the most varied diet that you can get. So you want to mix it up with them. You want to do different kinds of veggies, different kinds of insects. As adults, I will actually even occasionally give them pinkies, fish. I'll have frozen silver sides I have from my turtles, and they will devour those. So really just kind of mix it up. Do your homework before you just give them anything. Obviously, you want to make sure it's something that is safe for them. There are certain things like spinach that is not good for reptiles, at least not in large quantities, because it actually has a chemical in it that binds to the calcium, so that stops them from absorbing calcium that they need to grow their bones. So you don't really want to give any of your animals spinach. If you do, very, very sparingly, make sure you're giving them lots of other greens to go with it. Because it's not necessarily poisonous for them, it just stops their body. Like I said, it has a chemical in it that stops their body from absorbing the calcium that they need to grow. So if you are interested in any of these babies or want to be put on the wait list for when they're ready to go, I usually hold on to them for about a month before I sell any of them. I want to make sure they're all doing good, make sure they are eating, shedding, all normal, healthy, growing good before I send them out. Local pickup is always preferred. We are in upstate New York, but I will ship them if I have to. You can email me at the Reptile Haven _Wildlife Center .org if you'd like to put on the wait list for our next clutch of rankins. I've got probably half a dozen or a dozen people on the wait list right now. Like I said, I've only got about 19 to 20 eggs, including these two right here at the moment. My two girls are getting ready to lay eggs again soon. So I should have some more babies in about another 2 months. Um, so these guys don't last long. They are definitely one of my favorite animals that I've worked with in my 20-year career of keeping reptiles. They've always been a dream animal of mine. I'm just thankful that a couple years ago I finally got a chance to get a pair, and I have done fantastic with them ever since. I started with 2. I got babies from them the very first year. I had over 30 babies the first year that I had them. I kept a handful of them for breeding. Those just got up to breeding size this year. And these 2 right here are actually my second generation. They were produced by one of my very first babies that I ever produced from the first clutch about 3 years ago. She produced this first clutch for me this year, and they're gorgeous little babies. This right here is the female, the mother of those 2 babies that we just saw. She is actually the daughter of those original 2 dragons. She's actually the daughter of those 2 dragons that just laid eggs tonight. She is from the very first clutch I had from them 3 years ago. And she is my first Rankins that I actually bred and hatched out and have bred again. So this was her first time breeding this year. Her clutch fertility wasn't great. I don't know if it was just because of her, because she is still relatively young. She also hid her eggs, so I didn't find them for a day or 2. So only 2 out of, I believe she had 18 eggs altogether. Only 2 of them actually ended up hatching. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us today. Like I said, if you like these guys, check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, all at the Reptile Haven Wildlife Center. Links to all of our socials will be in the description down below. Check us out. Also, a link to our email will be down in the description. If you are interested in any of these babies or any of our future projects, or just want to tell us something, send us an email. We also have a Patreon page. You can head on over there if you would like to help us out. We are in the process of looking for a facility, a place that we can have all of these animals in. We have been planning on opening a reptile zoo. Like if you've followed us for any of our videos, you'll see that we are in the process of trying to start a zoo. We want a reptile zoo in upstate New York. All of the proceeds that we get on our Patreon page go straight to our animals, for food, enclosures, everything else that you can think of for them, filtration for our turtles, and we'll be going to our saving for our facility so that we can actually open up to the public, and have some really nice large enclosures for all of our animals, and to be able to get some other really cool animals. Like I said, please, if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye.